This is a question that has always bothered me from the minute we found out about Neville's parents and the prophecy, because it really makes no sense that the Death Eaters would attack them. I mean, what's their endgame here? And sure, there are a lot of times where the most common explanation and the correct one is the easiest one, and we could just say, oh, this is just the Death Eaters lashing out after Voldemort's fall, and, they're Death Eaters, they're not the best of thinkers anyway, but we do have to remember that Barty Crouch Jr. is with them, and he's probably the third or fourth most cunning character in the whole series, and Bellatrix Lestrange isn't exactly stupid either. I mean, she's the only Death Eater who's correct about Snape to not trust him, thinking that he's on Dumbledore's side. Really, she's the only character in the series, other than Dumbledore, who's correct about this. It's just that she can't admit that she's correct about it, because if she's right, then Voldemort's wrong, and she can't say that Voldemort is ever wrong. So, for as much as it's commonly believed that Barty Jr., Bellatrix, along with her husband Rodolphus and his brother Rabastin, are just lashing out here, that doesn't really make any sense. I mean, there's no logic to their temper tantrum then.
Not a great plan.
And even if you want to say, no, Bellatrix is exactly the type to lash out this way, and I'll grant you that. It would be in character for her, and I'd even buy that her husband and her brother-in-law would be willing to follow her to this, but then why would Barty Crouch Jr. be involved at all? Because at this point, nobody knows he's a Death Eater. He could just lay low here, even though he proclaims that he's the Dark Lord's most loyal follower. And that's where we start to get some answers to this question, because Junior could just say, no, if you guys are lashing out, then sure, go have fun, but I'm not going to waste my time with that. I'm not wasting the Dark Lord's time with that. I want to bring him back, and this isn't going to be doing that. This is just lashing out for sport, basically. And I phrase it like that specifically because that's how we're introduced to Barty Crouch Jr. We don't know it when we first read the book, but our introduction to him is, oh, the Death Eaters are attacking the Quidditch World Cup, they're hunting muggles for sport, and he gets angry at them and shoots the dark mark into the sky, and then he tells Voldemort this, and Voldemort does share this same point of view with him. I wanted to return to the campsite. I wanted to show those Death Eaters what loyalty to the Dark Lord meant, and to punish them for their lack of it. I used the stolen wand to cast the dark mark into the sky. So if Barty Jr. isn't attacking the Longbottoms just because he's lashing out, then he has to think that he's somehow doing this to bring back Voldemort. Which means that the rest of them could think that as well, so the question then is, how? Let's pretend for a second that we don't have Dumbledore giving us the answers for what happened in Godric's Hollow. That all we know for sure is that Voldemort went there to kill the Potters, James and Lily are dead, and somehow Harry survived the killing curse. Somehow the boy lived. So if that's what they know for sure, let's try to circle back on what they could know, starting with the prophecy, because obviously the only characters who we know about it for sure are Voldemort, Snape, and Dumbledore is the only one who knows the full thing. But we do know that there are at least rumors of the prophecy's existence. We learn that because right after Harry survives in Order of the Phoenix, the prophet is reporting about the prophecy again, of its possible existence. Now, obviously the general public doesn't know for sure, but they at least have some idea that is actually kind of correct. And if the general public at least has an idea about the prophecy's existence, then it would stand to reason that Voldemort's inner circle of Death Eaters would at least know more than them, but the only problem with that is that if they did know about it, it would only be because Voldemort wanted them to know about the prophecy, and that would be stupid, right?
That doesn't make sense.
Unless he wants them to know that he's about to accomplish his goal and become fully immortal, that the final threat to him is approaching, and once he's disposed of, there is nothing that is going to be standing in the way of the Death Eaters anymore. That this final threat is this boy who will be born at the end of July to parents who have thrice defied him. It's incredibly arrogant, but if you gave me a thesaurus and told me to describe Voldemort with 1,000 different words, I can still tell you humble wouldn't be one of them. And even though Voldemort believes it's Harry, the Death Eaters aren't stupid. They know the possibility that it's Neville who's the chosen one, because they know that the Longbottoms have also thrice defied the Dark Lord, and Neville is also born at the end of July. And this is important because it also is something that they don't know, which is that they don't know that Dumbledore knows that Voldemort thinks it's Harry who's the chosen one.
They don't know that we know they know we know.
And I bring this up because it's obvious that the Potters and the Longbottoms are all in the Order of the Phoenix, so Dumbledore is in charge of their protection, but he also does have to protect his new spy in the Death Eaters, because if he's only protecting the Potters, then Voldemort is going to know that Dumbledore knows what he thinks of the prophecy, and if he does think that, then he's immediately going to suspect that Snape is the spy. I mean, it's obvious. Snape will have already asked him to spare Lily, and, he's the one who heard the prophecy. He's going to be able to figure it out right away. So anything that Dumbledore does, he has to keep in mind that he also has to protect his spy so he can keep getting more information. So anything he's doing to protect the Potters, he's also going to have to do to protect the Longbottoms. So when Wormtail tells Voldemort that it's the Fidelius charm and he gives the Potter's location to him, maybe Voldemort tells the other Death Eaters, maybe not. Personally, I lean towards it making more sense for him to tell them that it's the Fidelius charm because, again, it kind of goes with his philosophy saying like, oh, see, my enemies are relying on each other. You can't trust anybody. And then with that, he then says like, you are forbidden from helping me with this final mission. Nobody's allowed to ask Wormtail where the Potters are, and again, he just wants to show that he's invincible. So he's going to handle this by himself. Again, it's all really arrogant. Maybe they know, maybe they don't, but I think it's more likely that they do know at least that it is the Fidelius charm, and if they do know, then it only stands to reason that they think that the Longbottoms are also protected by the Fidelius charm. Which means that when Voldemort's killing curse backfires on Halloween 1981, they have no answer for what happened, and all they could think is, hey, Dumbledore must have put some protection on Harry to cause the curse to backfire, so he must have also put it on Neville. Which means that any mission to bring back Voldemort is going to start with figuring out what spell it was that Dumbledore had that could block Avada Kedavra. So the Death Eaters immediately start trying to track down the Longbottoms, and it does make sense that the Fidelius charm would no longer be up on their house because Voldemort's gone. They think they're safe, so whether the spell has been taken down or they just moved out of the house, they're vulnerable again because they believe they're safe, but the Death Eaters manage to track them down, and once they do, they are going to do whatever it takes to get Voldemort back, and whatever information they have, they are going to find out. And of course, the Death Eaters rely on the Cruciatus Curse because they think they can just torture the information out of Frank and Alice, but the problem is, Frank and Alice don't know what happened. They don't know that Voldemort was willing to spare Lily and that's why Harry survived. So they couldn't give them this information even if they wanted to. And, it is a little bit ironic, especially considering that the Fidelius charm was just taken down, that, oh, this is more information that you can't torture out of somebody. Just, again, showing that torture isn't really the best way to get information. But then when we look at the Death Eaters' side of it, again, they don't know that Frank and Alice don't know how Harry survived, so they're going to just think that it's their Auror training kicking in, that they're able to resist the Cruciatus Curse a little more, and they're going to push it even harder, and it's what causes them to lose their minds. But what about Neville? Because while his parents are being tortured into insanity, he doesn't suffer a scratch, so why is that? Because these are the Death Eaters. They have no code, and even if you want to give them some benefit of the doubt for some reason and say, oh, well, Voldemort is a special kind of evil because he's willing to torture and kill babies, but come on, that's not really a good reason when you have Bellatrix Lestrange in this group. And we do know that she's not above torturing little ones, because in Order of the Phoenix, when Harry leads Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Neville, and Luna into the Department of Mysteries, her idea for Harry to give up the prophecy is, hey, let's torture Ginny. She's the smallest one after all. Which doesn't work, but again brings up the question, why is Neville okay after the attack? Why doesn't Bellatrix or any of the other Death Eaters suggest, hey, the Cruciatus curse isn't working on them. Let's maybe instead do something to their baby. Let's kill the 1-year-old.
Why is it always me?
Well, the answer comes down to that they're afraid of whatever this protection is that Dumbledore put on Harry. They think it's on Neville too, so if they attack him, then it's going to backfire on them the same way that it did their master, so they can't even really threaten that they're going to hurt Neville in some way, because they'll probably think, oh, Frank and Alice are just trying to goad us into it so that we'll attack the baby and then the curse will rebound onto us and then their whole family will be okay while all the Death Eaters that are attacking them will be dead. Again, it doesn't matter that they're wrong here, just that this is what they think will happen, that if they attack Neville, the curse will rebound and they will die instead. But, obviously on the one hand, it's really depressing that Neville has to grow up seeing his parents like this after they were driven into insanity, but on the other, it's also really lucky because it's the only reason why he survives this attack. If the Death Eaters were just lashing out, Neville would be dead, and that more than anything else is the biggest piece of evidence that they thought that they were bringing back Voldemort. And at the end of the day, all they really needed to bring him back was a rat, a snake, and a baby practicing their bowling.
Kill the stag!
Nice spare!
Come on, had to lighten the mood a little bit. Pretty heavy ending to the video, and what better way to do it than with some dark humor. But now I want to shift the question to you. What do you think would have happened if Barty Jr. and the Lestranges took a minute to think about what could have happened and actually tried to track down Voldemort instead of attacking the Longbottoms? Would he have come back earlier? What would have happened if he did? Maybe that's its own video. Let me know down below in the comments if you want to see that. But that's all I got for you today. So if you enjoyed, please drop a like, subscribe if you want more like this, and I'll see you next time on STV.